Our next speaker hails from the great state of Oklahoma. He is a Navy pilot and combat veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. He now serves in the House of Representatives, where he focuses on three specific areas: national security, economic freedom, and constitutional integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome a true warrior for your values in Washington, D.C., Representative Jim Bridenstine.
Thank you. Well, I've got to tell you what an honor it is to be here. What a privilege. I've been a fan of Family Research Council and certainly the Value Voters Summit for many years, and I'm a freshman member of Congress, and to have the honor to actually be on this stage and share my thoughts with you is something that is deeply humbling. I'd like to thank FRC and Tony Perkins for their great scholarly research that helped those of us in Washington, D.C. make good decisions. This is a great group, and I appreciate all that you do for our nation. It is true, I am a veteran of Afghanistan and a veteran of Iraq. I'm a Navy pilot. I see we have another true patriot right here in the dress and all. So it is this that I want to talk about. I flew missions off the USS Abraham Lincoln in Afghanistan in 2002. I flew from the Persian Gulf in 2003, flew Operation Southern Watch in Iraq, Operation Shock and Awe, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. I can tell you that many of my colleagues made the ultimate sacrifice for this nation. I can tell you that foreign fighters came in after we had won the war. Foreign fighters came in from Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda in Iraq got started by al-Zarqawi. Certainly, a lot of forces came in from Iran, as well as Syria, and destabilized the region. And when you think about what Americans did to secure Iraq with the surge, you think about the blood-bought gains and the tremendous sacrifice of our warfighters to bring stability to that region. In fact, it was in 2006 that Senator Obama made this statement. He said that a precipitous withdrawal from Iraq would, quote, lead to chaos, terrorism, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. He said it would engulf broad swaths of the Middle East and endanger the United States of America. Senator Obama in 2006, I'm going to repeat that: chaos, terrorism, ethnic cleansing, genocide. It would engulf broad swaths of the Middle East and endanger the United States of America. Senator Obama, 2006. Then he ran for president. He stuck his finger in the wind and said, that's not going to work. It became an unjust war. He said we took our eye off the ball, which was Afghanistan, and he said he was going to be the president that would end this war. He became president. His own administration, Ambassador Crocker, General Petraeus, they told him, to sustain the gains of the surge, we need 20 to 24,000 troops in Iraq. That's what they said. The president said, no, that's not going to work. I promise something different. I need something else. He said, come back with a different plan. They came back with a plan for 10,000 troops. They said, this is going to create more risk. We could lose more folks, but at the end of the day, we can sustain the gains of the surge with 10,000 troops. The president said that's not going to work. That's when the president, in a phone call with Maliki, said that any status of forces agreement that we come to with Iraq needs to be ratified by the Iraqi parliament. Historically, a status of forces agreement is nothing more than an exchange of diplomatic letters. It's our State Department and the Iraqi diplomats saying, we're going to have diplomatic immunity for American warfighters when they're in our nation. That's how those of us who fight our country's battles, we fall under American law, not foreign law. And that's important if we want to have a strong military. Historically, all that was an exchange of diplomatic letters. The president said, we have to have this ratified by the Iraqi parliament, knowing full well that the Iraqi parliament cannot agree on what day of the week it is, let alone how many troops we're going to have in Iraq. So it fell apart, and we withdrew. And guess what happened? Just as the president predicted in 2006 when he was a senator. Chaos, terrorism, ethnic cleansing, genocide. It has engulfed broad swaths of the Middle East, and it endangers the United States of America. Friends, in this country, we do not make foreign policy or national security decisions based on our political prospects. We do it on the interest of our nation. And now you look at ISIS. This is not Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was a terrorist organization. ISIS has an army. They're well trained. They're well equipped. They're well financed. They're recruiting from throughout the world. Estimates are over 100 Americans in their army. Many have already come home, according to this administration. There are 1,500 estimates from the United Kingdom, and they're recruiting from Europe as well. Many of these folks have American passports, and al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, is saying that the next confrontation will be directly against the United States of America. This is a threat, and it didn't have to be this way, and we have to deal with it in a very serious manner. And you don't deal with it by saying, you know what, I'm the commander-in-chief, but I don't want to be the commander-in-chief. Therefore, I'm going to train and equip so-called moderate Syrian rebels that have allegiances with al-Qaeda because I'm afraid to be the commander-in-chief. If this is a threat to our country, we eliminate it. If it's not, we don't. I say it's a threat to our country and it needs to be dealt with. When it comes to who I trust with American firepower, it is Americans. It is people who, like me, swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But when we train and equip folks that have extremely limited common interests and questionable loyalties, we put ourselves in jeopardy. We have seen this happen over and over again. And yet, once again, the president is making a decision based on politics, not based on what's in our national security interest. Friends, our Constitution is at stake, and I want to make sure our warfighters are the ones who are sworn to our Constitution, not any other allegiances. And when I talk about our Constitution, it's at stake in other ways as well. It wasn't too long after I got back from the war in Iraq that there was a decision made. Actually, it was even before, I think, 2002, a decision was made by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that said that it was unconstitutional to use the words "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance. Do you guys remember this? And interestingly, this was a decision that tore at my heart. How in the world is it unconstitutional to use the word "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance? When I got back from the war in Iraq, I was in California, stationed at Naval Air Station Point Mugu. I went to a friend's birthday party, and there was a lot of people there that I didn't know. One of the people, it happened, was a clerk on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And I was just sitting on the couch next to him, striking up a conversation, and I asked him, "Were you involved in that decision? Declaring it unconstitutional that we use the words "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance?" And he said, "Not only was I involved, I wrote it for the 3-judge panel." I said, "How is it unconstitutional to use the words "under God" in the pledge?" And he said, "Well, it violates separation of church and state." And I asked him, it's a great question. I said, "Where is that in the Constitution?" He said, "Well, it's in the First Amendment." I said, "What does the First Amendment say?" And he said, "Well, it says separation of church and state." Hold on. This is a Stanford-educated attorney who is a clerk on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and wrote the decision for the 3-judge panel. And I asked him, I said, "I'm a Navy pilot. I'm sworn to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Let me tell you what the First Amendment says." It says Congress, that's the United States Congress, shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Based on that, how is it unconstitutional to use the words under God in the Pledge of Allegiance? This is what he said. He got lawyerly all of a sudden. Well, it violates the Establishment Clause. He said it establishes religion. I said, that's interesting. Under God establishes religion. Which religion does it establish? Maybe it establishes Christianity. Maybe it establishes Judaism. Maybe it establishes Islam. Which religion does under God establish? He said, well, it establishes general deism. I said, well, if general deism is a religion, you would also have to argue that its alternate, atheism, is also a religion. And he said, yes. He admitted that that was the case. And I said, well, then by removing under God from the Pledge of Allegiance, you have just declared our national religion as atheism, which is a violation of the First Amendment, which you don't know. And what he said actually scared me. Thank you for that. What he said actually scared me more than his own decision. What he said after that was this: nobody made that argument. He didn't say that the argument was made and it was defeated. He said nobody made that argument. Friends, that's where we are in this country. And this decision went to the Supreme Court in 2004. And there was one judge that wasn't available, but the 8-judge panel made a ruling 5-3 to overturn the decision of the Ninth Circuit. And I want to tell you how serious this is. We were 2 people. Out of a country of 300 million plus, we were 2 people away from losing under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. That should give all of us concern and pause. When you think about nations that have turned their backs on God, nothing comes to mind more to me as somebody who has fought our country's battles than the nation of North Korea. As a young lieutenant junior grade, when I showed up at my squadron for the first time, I headed out to Seoul. We were doing an exercise as if North Korea invaded South Korea. How would we as the United States of America respond? And during this 30-day exercise, I took one day off. This was back in 2001. I took one day off, and I went up to Panmunjom, the demilitarized zone. Panmunjom is where the armistice was signed in 1953. Just by show of hands, is anybody here a veteran of the war in Korea? Did I see a hand in the back? Anybody? Well, for those that are veterans of the war in Korea, let me tell you, I have not forgotten your war, and your war was just. So I took one day off. I went up to Panmunjom, where the armistice was signed. We spent time at the demilitarized zone, and I started seeing a whole lot of things that I, as a lieutenant junior grade, who grew up in America, had never seen before. I was with a young lieutenant in the Japanese army. He spoke Korean, he spoke English, he of course spoke Japanese. We struck up a conversation, got to know each other well, and he started explaining things to me that I was seeing up there at the demilitarized zone. On the other side of the demilitarized zone was a big city in North Korea, and it looked like it was prosperous, and I asked him, what is that big city over there? He said, well, that city is called Propaganda City. The buildings have no windows, they have no floors, they have no useful purpose whatsoever, but it was built as propaganda to encourage South Koreans to defect to North Korea. It sounds funny. It gets funnier. The loudspeakers, I asked him what those said. The loudspeakers said, "Come to North Korea, the land of opportunity." At this time, 5% of North Koreans were starving to death every year. The final thing that I saw were the billboards, and I asked him what the billboards said. And the Japanese soldier said that those billboards say, "Come to North Korea, our generals are better than your generals." And every time I say that, it gets a chuckle. And it astonished me when I was there for the first time. See, here in the United States, we don't fight for generals. We don't fight for autocrats, and we don't fight for men. We fight for institutions. We fight for the Constitution. We fight for the Declaration of Independence, and we fight for the Bill of Rights. We fight for the right to assemble here today without having to register with the federal government, to express our views freely, even if we're criticizing the president, as I'm doing right here today. That's what we fight for. And friends, that's what gives me, as an American, hope. And I will say this, when I was in Korea, I went to church. I went to church in Korea, and I saw on a church a cross, and so I went in. And I didn't know what I was getting into. But when I went in there, the people, they didn't look like me, and they didn't speak my language. But they were praising God. And they were doing it in the melody of Amazing Grace. And the only reason that happened is because somebody from my country went to that country and made the ultimate sacrifice. I'm going to close on a quote. This is a quote of a gentleman named Martin Treptow. He was from Illinois. He was a barber. And in World War I, he got called into his country's service. He was drafted. He found himself on the Western Front. He served his country, and he was killed. And when they found his body and they gathered up his belongings, they found a diary. And this was a quote written in his diary. He says this: "America must win this war. I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone." Friends, what gives me hope is the fact that I have served with people like Martin Treptow. And they love this country with everything they have. And they are willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that the next generation inherits the America we inherited. Thank you so much. God bless you.